freedom. It is a concept Emma Vance had forgotten after 6 years of servitude in the Silver Creek Pack. But tonight, that word hung in the air, heavy with the scent of rain and dangerous power. King Damon Thorne, the alpha of alphas, stood before her, his massive silhouette swallowing the light of the fireplace. He didn't ask for her body. He didn't ask for her submission. He made a terrifying bargain. "Survive the night in my bed, Omega," he growled, his eyes flashing a lethal gold. "Endure my wolf until dawn without running, and I will sign your freedom papers myself." Emma was terrified, but she knew one thing the king didn't. She wasn't just an Omega. She was his fated mate. The corridors of the Silver Creek Pack house were freezing, a fitting temperature for the way Emma Vance had been treated since her parents died in the border wars. At 22, she was an Omega, the lowest of the low, tasked with scrubbing floors until her knuckles bled and her knees bruised. Tonight, however, the air in the pack house felt different. It was electric, charged with a terrifying mixture of awe and dread. The Lycan King was here, King Damon Thorne. His name alone was enough to make grown alphas compel their necks in submission. He was the ruler of the Western Territories, a man rumored to be more beast than human, a warrior who had decimated the rogue uprisings single-handedly. They said he was cold, ruthless, and incapable of love. They said his wolf was so volatile that he slept in a reinforced dungeon to keep from tearing his own guards apart. Emma kept her head down as she scrubbed the marble tiles of the grand foyer. She was invisible. That was her survival strategy. If no one saw her, no one could hurt her. "Faster, you useless mute!" The sharp kick to her ribs sent Emma sprawling across the wet stone. She bit her lip to stifle a cry, tasting copper. Standing over her was Lydia, the beta female who ran the household staff with sadistic glee. Lydia had high cheekbones and a heart made of ice. "The king's delegation arrives in 10 minutes, Lydia hissed, grabbing a handful of Emma's frayed grey dress. "If I see a single speck of dust, you won't just go hungry tonight. I'll have you thrown into the kennels with the hunting dogs." Emma nodded quickly, scrambling back to her knees. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken since the day the former alpha, a cruel man named Richard, had decreed she was to be stripped of her rank. The heavy oak doors groaned open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. "He's here," a guard whispered, his face pale. Emma didn't look up. She scrubbed harder, the bristled brush tearing at her raw skin. But she could
feel it. A power so immense it felt like gravity had shifted. It rolled over the foyer in waves. A scent of dark cedar, ozone, and something uniquely masculine that made her dormant wolf stir in a way it never had before. Boots thundered against the floor. Heavy, military-grade boots. "Alpha Richard!" A deep, baritone voice echoed. It wasn't loud, but it commanded absolute silence. "Your borders are weak. I saw 3 breaches on my way in." King Damon Thorne. From her position on the floor, Emma could only see his boots. They were black, polished, and spattered with fresh mud. He stopped just inches from where she was scrubbing. "My apologies, Your Majesty," Alpha Richard stammered, his usually booming voice reduced to a squeak. "We have been short-staffed. The rogues are relentless. Excuses are for the weak," the king replied. Emma tried to make herself smaller, holding her breath. "Please move," she begged silently. "Please just walk past me." But he didn't move. The king paused. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. Slowly, the black boots turned toward her. "What is this?" Damon asked. "Just a servant, Your Majesty," Lydia interjected quickly, stepping forward with a fake, charming smile. "An Omega, a mute. She's slow, but she cleans well enough. I'll have her removed from your sight immediately." Lydia reached down to grab Emma's hair, intending to drag her away. "Don't touch her." The command was a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Lydia froze, her hand hovering in midair. "Stand up!" the king ordered. He wasn't speaking to Lydia. He was speaking to Emma. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Slowly, trembling violently, she pushed herself up. She kept her eyes fixed on the middle of his chest. He was wearing a black tactical shirt that strained against muscles carved from granite. He was huge, easily 6'5", radiating heat and danger. "Look at me," he commanded. Emma lifted her chin. When her eyes met his, the world stopped. He had eyes like molten gold, flecked with a savage ancient amber. His face was sharp-angled, handsome in a brutal, devastating way, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. For a second, his pupils dilated. His nostrils flared, inhaling her scent, lavender and vanilla, hidden beneath the smell of cleaning soap and misery. Emma felt a pull in her gut, a magnetic snap that nearly buckled her knees. "Mate." Her wolf whispered the word, waking up from a years-long slumber. "Mate. Mate. Mate." The king's expression didn't soften. Instead, it hardened into a mask of torturous conflict. His jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked in his cheek. He looked at her not with love, but with a terrifying intensity. "What is your name?" he asked. Emma opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She pointed to her throat and shook her head. "She is Emma."
"My king," Alpha Richard said nervously. "She is damaged goods, worthless to someone of your stature." King Damon didn't break eye contact with her. He took a step closer, towering over her. He reached out, his large hand hovering near her face. Emma flinched, expecting a blow. Damon froze. A flash of pain crossed his eyes when he saw her fear. He dropped his hand. "Bring her to my chambers tonight," Damon said, his voice void of emotion. The entire hall gasped. Alpha Richard's jaw dropped. Lydia looked like she had swallowed a lemon. "Your chambers?" Richard asked. "Sir, surely you'd prefer one of my daughters? Or a high-ranking she-wolf? This girl is an omega. She's malnutritioned, weak—" "Did I stutter, Alpha?" Damon growled, turning his lethal glare onto the pack leader. "No, no, your majesty, of course not." Damon looked back at Emma one last time. The connection between them sizzled, hot and painful. "Clean her up. Send her to the East Wing guest quarters. If she is late by a single minute, I will burn this pack house to the ground." He turned and stormed away, his cape billowing behind him, leaving Emma standing in a puddle of dirty water, her heart racing with a terrifying mixture of hope and doom. 3 hours later, Emma stood outside the heavy mahogany doors of the East Wing's master suite. Lydia and the other maids had scrubbed Emma raw. They had stripped her of her rags and forced her into a silk nightgown that was far too fine for someone of her station. It was silver, clinging to her curves, thin enough to be scandalous. "Don't get any ideas," Lydia had whispered venomously as she shoved Emma down the hallway. "He doesn't want you. He probably just needs something to kill. Rumor has it his wolf takes over at night. You're a sacrifice, Emma. Nothing more." Those words echoed in Emma's mind as she stared at the brass handle. A sacrifice. Was that it? Was the mate bond she felt one-sided? Sometimes, if an alpha was too powerful, they rejected their mates instantly, or worse, they used them and discarded them. She raised a trembling hand and knocked. "Enter." The voice was deep, commanding, and sounded exhausted. Emma pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room was massive, illuminated only by the dying embers of a fire and the moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The scent of him was overwhelming here. Cedar and rain, thick and intoxicating. King Damon was standing by the window, looking out at the dark forest. He had discarded his tactical vest. He wore only loose black lounge pants. His back was a landscape of muscle and scars, evidence of 1,000 battles. He didn't turn around. "Lock the door." Emma's fingers fumbled with the lock. Click. "Come here," he said. Emma walked forward, her bare feet silent on the plush rug. She stopped 5 feet away from him. Damon turned slowly. In the moonlight, he looked even more dangerous. His eyes were glowing faintly, the wolf heavily present. He looked at her, his gaze sweeping from her damp hair down to her bare feet. "You're shaking," he observed. Emma nodded. She hugged her arms around herself. "Do you know why I called you here, Emma?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly soft, though it carried a rough edge. She shook her head. Damon walked over to a small table and poured a glass of amber liquid. He downed it in one shot. "They say I am a monster," he said, turning back to her. "They say I kill my bed warmers, that my wolf is too feral to control." He took a step toward her. Emma forced herself to stand her ground, though every instinct screamed to run. "I have a proposition for you," Damon said. He stopped inches from her. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating off his skin. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. He held it up. "Do you know what this is?" Emma squinted. It was a document. She saw the royal seal, and she saw her name. "These are emancipation papers," Damon said. "Full citizenship, a home in the capital, a monthly stipend that would make you richer than Alpha Richard, and immunity from any wolf who tries to harm you." Emma's eyes went wide. It was a ticket to life. It was a dream she hadn't dared to dream. What do I have to do?" she mouthed, her lips forming the silent words. Damon's eyes darkened. He tossed the paper onto the bed. "You have to stay." He stepped closer, backing her up until her legs hit the edge of the mattress. "My wolf. He is unstable tonight. It is the blood moon. The madness is upon me. Usually, I chain myself in the dungeons." He leaned down, his face inches from hers, his breath hot on her neck. "But when I saw you, when I smelled you, my wolf went quiet. For the first time in 10 years, he went quiet." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "I need you to anchor me, Emma. I need you to stay in this bed, with me, until the sun rises. If you can endure the night, if you can stay by my side while I fight the beast inside me, without running, without screaming, then that paper is yours. You will be free." Emma stared at him. He wanted her as a tranquilizer, a support animal? "But be warned," Damon whispered, his thumb caressing her lower lip, sending sparks shooting through her veins. "If you run, if you try to leave this room, the deal is void, and if my wolf takes over completely, I cannot guarantee your safety." The air crackled with tension. This was a test, a deadly, dangerous test. But then, Damon leaned in and whispered against her ear, his voice rough with suppressed desire. "But I promise you this, little Omega. If you stay, I will protect you with my last breath. Even from myself." Emma looked at the papers on the bed. Then she looked at the king, her mate, though he hadn't admitted it yet. She saw the desperation in his golden eyes. He wasn't just a king, he was a man in pain. She made her choice. Emma reached out and placed her small, trembling hand on his chest, right over his beating heart. Damon let out a shuddering breath, leaning his forehead against hers. "Then let the night begin," he growled. The lock clicked into place, sealing the world away. Inside the suite, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. But the real heat came from the man standing in the center of the room. Damon turned his back to Emma, his hands gripping the edge of the heavy oak dresser until the wood groaned in protest. "Stay back," he warned, his voice a guttural rasp that sounded like gravel grinding together. Don't come closer until I tell you." Emma stood by the bed, her fingers clutching the silk of her nightgown. She watched, wide-eyed, as the King of Alphas began to unravel. It wasn't a graceful transformation. It was a war. Damon's muscles rippled violently beneath his skin, his bones shifting with sickening cracks that echoed in the silent room. He fell to his knees, a roar of pure agony tearing from his throat. His skin flushed fever-hot, and claws, sharp, black, and lethal, extended from his fingertips, gouging deep furrows into the expensive rug. "He's in pain," Emma realized with a jolt. The rumors painted him as a bloodthirsty monster who reveled in violence. But watching him now, Emma saw no joy. She saw a man fighting a losing battle against a primal force that wanted to consume him. The blood moon madness was a curse for powerful alphas, a time when their wolf sought total dominance, destroying the human consciousness. "Run!" Damon gasped, his head hanging low, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Get to the bathroom. Lock the door." Emma took a step back toward the bathroom. It was the safe choice. It was the smart choice. But then Damon looked up. His face was contorted, half-shifted. His canines had elongated into fangs, and his eyes were no longer human. They were entirely black, consumed by the beast. Yet deep within that abyss, Emma saw a flicker of the man begging for help. If she left him now, the wolf would win. He would tear this room apart, and perhaps himself. "Endure the night," he had said. "Anchor me." Emma stopped. She looked at the bathroom door, then back at the trembling king. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but a strange, warm instinct washed over her. The mate bond. It was pulling her toward him, whispering that she was the only thing that could save him. Slowly, deliberately, Emma took a step toward him. Damon growled, a low, menacing sound that vibrated in her chest. "No, stay back!" Emma took another step, then another. "I said get back!" Damon roared, spinning around. He swiped his hand through the air, and the force of the motion shattered the mirror above the dresser, glass raining down like diamonds. Emma didn't flinch. She stood 3 feet away from him, her chin lifted. She couldn't speak, so she let her scent speak for her. She projected calm. She projected trust. She released the lavender and vanilla pheromones that she had learned to suppress for years to avoid attention. The scent hit Damon like a physical blow. He froze, his chest heaving. The blackness in his eyes swirled, fighting against the gold. His nostrils flared, inhaling deeply. The wolf inside him, the beast that wanted to tear the world down, suddenly paused. It recognized the scent. "Mate." Damon fell back onto his heels, shaking uncontrollably. "Why?" he whispered, his voice sounding like broken glass. "Why aren't you running?" Emma sank to her knees in front of him, ignoring the shards of glass on the carpet. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and placed her palm against his burning cheek. The contact was electric. A shockwave of energy blasted through them both. Damon gasped, his eyes rolling back for a second, as the soothing coolness of her touch battled the fire in his blood. He leaned into her hand, closing his eyes. "You are foolish," he murmured, though his voice had lost its demonic edge. "I could snap your neck in a second." Emma used her thumb to trace the scar running through his eyebrow. She moved her other hand to his chest, feeling the erratic, thunderous beat of his heart. She visualized her own calm heartbeat, willing it to sync with his. "Slow down," she thought intensely. "I am here. You are safe." Damon's breathing hitched. Slowly the claws retracted. The blackness in his eyes receded, leaving behind the molten gold. He slumped forward, resting his forehead against her shoulder. Ideally, An omega should never be this close to a volatile alpha. It was a death wish. But Emma wasn't just an omega. She was his. "You feel it, don't you?" Damon whispered against her neck, his arms slowly coming up to wrap around her waist. "The pull." Emma nodded against his shoulder. "I have searched for you for 10 years, he confessed, the vulnerability in his voice shocking her. "Every pack, every territory. I thought the moon goddess had forsaken me. I thought I was destined to go mad alone." He pulled back slightly to look at her face. "And I find you here, in this hellhole, scrubbing floors." Anger flashed in his eyes, not at her, but for her. "Who took your voice, Emma?" he asked gently. Emma stiffened. The memory was a dark, jagged thing she kept buried deep. She shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Damon didn't push. He swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Emma gasped silently, clutching his shoulders. He carried her to the massive bed and laid her down on the silk sheets. She expected him to climb on top of her, to claim what was his by right of the bond. But he didn't. Damon lay down beside her, keeping a respectful distance of a few inches. He grabbed the thick duvet and pulled it over them both. "Sleep," he commanded softly. "I won't touch you. Not like that. Not until you can say my name." He reached out and interlaced his large, calloused fingers with hers. "Just don't let go. If you let go, the cold comes back." Emma squeezed his hand tight. For the first time in 6 years, the icy chill of the Silver Creek pack house didn't reach her. She was engulfed in the furnace of the Dragon King's heat. She watched him as his breathing evened out and he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first he'd had in a decade. Emma didn't sleep, though. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, knowing that come morning, everything would change. She had survived the night. But surviving the morning would be a different battle entirely. Sunlight streamed through the heavy velvet curtains, hitting Emma's face. She blinked awake, panic instantly seizing her as she realized where she was. She was in the king's bed. She turned. The other side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. Panic flared. Had he left? Had he abandoned her? Emma scrambled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold floor. On the bedside table, anchored by a heavy gold dagger, was the parchment. The Emancipation Papers. She pulled them free. At the bottom, in bold, aggressive ink, was the signature. King Damon Thorne. He had done it. She was free. "You're awake." Emma spun around. Damon was standing on the balcony, leaning against the doorframe. He was fully dressed in his military uniform, looking every bit the ruthless king the world feared. But when his eyes met hers, they were clear. The madness was gone. "I ordered breakfast," he said, gesturing to a silver cart filled with fruits, pastries, and cured meats, more food than Emma had seen in a month. "Eat, you're too thin." Emma hesitated, then walked over and took a strawberry. She ate.
Ate quickly, her eyes never leaving him. "We leave in an hour," Damon said, buttoning his cuffs. "Pack whatever you wish to keep, which, judging by the rags you were wearing yesterday, is nothing. I will have a wardrobe made for you in the capital." Emma froze. "We?" She pointed to the papers and then to herself, then pointed to the door. She was supposed to be free to go where she wanted. Damon smirked, a dangerous, predatory curve of his lips. He walked over to her, towering over her small frame. "You are free from Silver Creek, Emma. You are free from servitude," he said, stepping into her personal space. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But you are my mate. Did you think I would sign these papers and let you walk away from me?" Emma's breath hitched. "You anchored me," Damon said intensely. "You are the only thing keeping the beast at bay. You are coming to the capital with me, as my guest, For now. It wasn't a request. It was a royal decree wrapped in velvet. Before Emma could process this, a heavy knock pounded on the door. Enter. Damon barked, his demeanor instantly shifting from lover to king. The door opened. It wasn't breakfast. It was Alpha Richard, Lydia, and two of the king's own Gamma guards. Alpha Richard looked pale, but Lydia wore a triumphant, twisted smile that made Emma's stomach turn. Your Majesty, Richard bowed low. I apologize for the intrusion, but a grave crime has been committed. Damon placed himself in front of Emma, blocking her from their view. Speak quickly, Richard. My patience is thin this morning. The Luna's diamond necklace. Lydia chimed in, stepping forward with fake tears in her eyes. My late mother's necklace. It was stolen from the vault last night during the chaos of your arrival. And what does that have to do with me? Damon asked coldly. We searched the servants' quarters this morning, Richard said, wringing his hands. We found nothing, but one servant was not in her quarters last night. Richard's eyes flicked to Emma, who was peeking out from behind Damon's massive back. We demand to search her, Lydia said, her voice dripping with venom. She's a thief. Everyone knows Omegas steal to survive. She probably thought she could seduce you, take the jewelry, and run. Damon let out a low, menacing laugh. You think this girl stole from you, while she was in my bed? She had time before she came to you, Lydia insisted. Please, Your Majesty. Justice must be served. If she has it, she must be punished according to pack law. Pack law for theft was brutal. Public whipping. Or, worse, exile into the Roguelands without protection. Damon felt Emma tremble against his back. He turned his head slightly. Did you take it?
He asked her quietly. Emma shook her head violently. No. She denies it, Damon said, turning back to the group. Now get out. We have the right to check her person, Lydia shrieked, losing her composure. Unless the king harbors criminals? The accusation hung in the air. To refuse a search for a stolen pack heirloom would look suspicious to the council. Damon's jaw tightened. He knew Emma was innocent, but he had to play the game to get her out safely. Fine, Damon spat. Check her pockets. But if you touch her skin, Lydia, you lose a hand. Lydia stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. She reached for the pocket of the silk robe Emma was wearing, the robe Damon had provided. Emma frowned. She hadn't put anything in there. Lydia reached in, her hand rummaging for a second. Then, with a gasp of theatrical shock, she pulled her hand out. Dangling from her fingers was a heavy, glittering diamond necklace. The room went deathly silent. Emma stared at the jewelry in horror. She had never seen it before in her life. Lydia had palmed it. She had planted it right then and there. It was a sleight of hand. Thief! Lydia screamed. I knew it! She stole the Luna's legacy! Alpha Richard's face hardened. This is a capital offense, Your Majesty. By the laws of the Western Territories, she must be stripped of her status and handed over to the pack for punishment immediately. Damon went rigid. The air in the room dropped to freezing temperatures. The shadows in the corners of the room began to stretch and curl like smoke. Emma grabbed Damon's arm, shaking her head frantically, her mouth opening in a silent scream of denial. Damon looked at the necklace, then at Lydia's smug face. He smelled the deceit. It reeked of sulfur and lies. But the evidence was physical. Hand her over, sire, Richard commanded, emboldened by the proof. She is a criminal of Silver Creek. Damon slowly turned to face them. His eyes were beginning to glow that dangerous amber again. You want to punish her? Damon asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. It is the law, Richard stated. Damon reached out and took the necklace from Lydia's hand. He crushed the diamonds in his fist, the gems turning to dust under his supernatural strength. He let the dust fall to the floor. Then the evidence is gone, Damon growled. You can't do that, Lydia screeched. I am the king, Damon roared, the sound shaking the window panes. I am the law." He grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her to his side. "This woman is under my protection. If you want her, you will have to go through my wolf." "That is tyranny," Richard shouted, signaling the guards. "The council will hear of this. You cannot just take a pack member who has committed a crime." "She is not a pack member," Damon announced, his voice booming. He turned to Emma, looking into her terrified eyes. He knew he had to play his trump card. He had to claim her in a way that superseded all pack law. He had to make her untouchable. Damon grabbed Emma's face with both hands. "Forgive me," he whispered. Before Emma could react, Damon leaned down and crashed his lips against hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. And then he moved lower. "No!" Lydia screamed. Damon buried his face in the crook of Emma's neck, right over her scent gland, and sank his teeth in. Emma cried out, a silent, jagged gasp, as pain and pleasure exploded through her body. The mark. He was marking her. Damon pulled back, his mouth stained with a drop of her ruby blood. A glowing, intricate mark of a dragon wrapped around a wolf began to form on Emma's skin, pulsating with golden light. Damon turned to the horrified Alpha and Beta. "She is not a thief," Damon snarled, his eyes glowing fully gold. "She is your queen." The silence that followed was absolute. "Now," Damon whispered, the threat hanging heavy in the air. "Bow!" The silence in the armored SUV was absolute, save for the low hum of the engine as the convoy sped away from Silver Creek. Emma sat huddled in the corner of the leather seat, as far away from Damon as the confined space would allow. Her hand hovered over her neck. The skin there burned. The mark. It was real. She could feel the connection thrumming in her blood, a golden, invisible tether linking her mind to his. She could feel his exhaustion, his lingering anger, and underneath it all, a fierce, protective possessiveness that terrified her. "Stop touching it," Damon said, his voice low. He didn't look at her. He was staring out the tinted window at the passing forest. "It will heal by nightfall." Emma dropped her hand instantly, clasping her fingers in her lap. Damon sighed, a sound that seemed to scrape against his ribs. He turned to face her. The rage that had consumed him in the pack house was gone, replaced by a weary gravity. "I know you are frightened," he said. "I moved too fast. I claimed you without your permission." Emma looked at him. Permission? No Alpha had ever asked for her permission, for anything. "But I had no choice," Damon continued, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "Richard would have handed you over to the council before I could get the car started. Accusations of theft against the crown are treason. They would have executed you, Emma." Emma shivered. She knew he was right. But being the queen felt like a different kind of execution. She was a mute servant, an omega. She didn't know how to rule. She didn't know how to be a wife. She barely knew how to be a person. Damon reached into the side compartment and pulled out a leather-bound notebook and a heavy fountain pen. He slid them across the seat toward her. "You have a voice, Emma," he said firmly. "Even if you cannot speak, you have words. Use this." Emma hesitated, then picked up the pen. Her hand shook as she uncapped it. She wrote 4 words in neat, looping script and turned the book to him. "Why me? I'm broken." Damon read the words. His jaw tightened. He reached out, covering her hand with his own. The sparks were immediate, warming her chilled skin. "You are not broken," he said fiercely. "You are surviving. There is a difference." He leaned back, scrubbing a hand over his face. "And as for why do you think I chose you because of your rank or your beauty?" He shook his head. "My wolf has been silent for a decade, Emma. Violent. uncontrollable. The Mad King, they call me. I have slept in chains. I have hurt good men because I couldn't stop the shift. He looked at her, his expression raw. Last night, for the first time in 10 years, the noise stopped. When you touched me, it was quiet. You are the only thing standing between me and the monster. You aren't just my mate, Emma. You are my cure. Emma stared at him. The most powerful man in the world, admitting he was weak without her. It shifted something in her chest. She wasn't just a prop. He needed her. She looked down at the notebook again. She hesitated, the tip of the pen hovering over the paper. There was a secret she had kept for 6 years. A secret about why she really stopped speaking. She wrote, "Richard didn't take my voice. I stopped speaking so they wouldn't find me." Damon frowned as he read it. "Find you? Who?" Emma's breath hitched. She quickly scribbled out the words, shaking her head. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. If the people who killed her parents knew she was alive, if they knew she was the queen, they would come for her. And they would kill Damon too. Damon watched her panic. He didn't press her. He simply reached into a cooler box and pulled out a bottle of water, twisting the cap off for her. "We are approaching Obsidian City," he said, shifting the topic. "The capital. It is a viper's nest. My council is hungry for power. They wanted me to marry a high-ranking alpha female from the northern clans to secure a military alliance, bringing home an Omega, a mute Omega, as my queen. It will be seen as an act of war." He leaned in, his gaze intense. "They will try to break you, Emma. They will whisper. They will test you. But remember this. You wear my mark. You are under my protection. If anyone looks at you the wrong way, tell me. I will burn their houses to ash." Emma nodded, clutching the notebook to her chest like a shield. The car slowed. Through the window, the trees gave way to massive iron gates. Beyond them lay a sprawling city of black stone and glass, built into the side of a jagged mountain. And at the very peak, piercing the clouds, was the Obsidian Palace. Her new prison, or her new home. The Obsidian Palace was terrifyingly grand. The floors were black marble, the chandeliers were made of real crystals, and the guards standing at every door were 7 feet tall, radiating alpha power. Emma felt tiny. She walked half a step behind Damon, her head down, trying to make herself invisible, but it was impossible. Every servant, every guard, every passing noble stopped and stared. They stared at her frayed grey dress, which she was still wearing, and the fresh, angry mark on her neck. Whispers followed them like smoke. "An Omega? Is that a servant? The king has gone mad at last." Damon ignored them all. He marched straight through the grand hall, his hand resting possessively on the small of Emma's back, daring anyone to speak up. "Take her to the royal suite," Damon ordered the head housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable. "Burn these rags. Get her silk, velvet, cashmere, whatever she wants. And call Dr. Orris. Immediately." An hour later, Emma was sitting on an exam table in a medical wing that looked more like a spaceship than a hospital. She had been bathed, scrubbed, and dressed in a soft, oversized robe that smelled of lavender. Dr. Arris was a beta, a man with kind eyes and wire-rimmed glasses. He was the royal healer, known for his expertise in wolf biology. Damon stood by the door, arms crossed, watching every move like a hawk. "Open your mouth, please, Your Majesty," Dr. Orris said gently. Emma hesitated at the title Your Majesty, but she opened her mouth. Dr. Orris used a small light to look down her throat. He frowned. He adjusted the light. He frowned deeper. He hummed. "Strange. What is it?" Damon demanded, stepping forward. Is there permanent damage? Did Richard hurt her? Physically? No, Dr. Orris said, clicking the light off. Her vocal cords are perfectly healthy. There is no scarring, no inflammation. Anatomically, she should be able to sing an opera right now. Emma looked down at her hands. She had tried to speak. In the dark, alone in her room at Silver Creek, she had tried to whisper. But nothing ever came out. Just air. Then why is she mute? Damon growled. Is it psychological? Trauma? That was my initial guess, Dr. Aris said. He walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a small vial of blue liquid. But I sensed something odd. A faint energy signature. He turned to Emma. My queen, may I take a small drop of blood, just a prick from your finger? Emma nodded. Dr. Aris pricked her finger. He let the drop of red blood fall into the blue liquid. Usually the liquid would turn purple for a wolf. The liquid didn't turn purple. It hissed, it boiled, and then it turned a brilliant, glowing silver. Dr. Orris dropped the vial. It shattered on the floor. The room went silent. Damon stared at the silver liquid sizzling on the tile. What does that mean? Damon asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Dr. Aris looked at Emma with wide, terrified eyes. He backed away slowly. That is impossible, the doctor stammered. Silver blood reaction? That hasn't been seen since the Great War. He trailed off, looking at Damon. Since the moon coven was wiped out, Damon finished the sentence. Emma's heart stopped. The moon coven. The legends said they were a group of white witches and wolves who could manipulate nature. They were hunted to extinction 50 years ago because their power was too great. She isn't just mute, sire, Dr. Aris whispered, his hands shaking. She has been sealed. Sealed? It's a powerful binding spell, Aris explained rapidly. Someone placed a magical block on her voice. Not to punish her, but to hide her. Damon looked at Emma. She was frozen, her face pale. Hide her from what? Damon asked. Her voice, Aris said, looking at the silver stain on the floor. If she speaks, she doesn't just make sound, sire. A wolf with that bloodline. If she speaks, she can command. She can command alphas. She could even command you. Damon went still. An Omega who could command an Alpha King? It was unheard of. It was dangerous. It was a power that could topple empires. Who did this to you? Damon asked Emma, his voice urgent. Emma, who sealed you? Emma grabbed the notebook. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen. She remembered the night her parents died. She remembered the tall man in the red cloak who had touched her throat and whispered, "Be silent, little star, or they will find you." She started to write. The man in the red. Suddenly, the doors to the medical bay burst open. "So it is true!" a woman strode in. She was tall, gorgeous, and terrifying. She wore a dress of crimson silk that looked like spilled blood. Her hair was platinum blonde, and her eyes were cold, hard flint. Lady Seraphina, the daughter of the High Councilman, the woman who had spent the last 5 years trying to get into Damon's bed. She looked at Emma with pure disgust. "You brought a stray into the palace, Damon?" Seraphina sneered, ignoring the shattered vial on the floor. "And not just a stray, a mute, broken thing. The council is convening in the throne room. They want answers. They want to know why you rejected the Northern Alliance for this." Seraphina walked up to Emma, looming over her. Emma shrank back. "Look at her," Seraphina laughed cruelly. "She smells like fear and dirty dishwater. She isn't a queen, she's a pet." Seraphina reached out to grab Emma's chin. "Don't touch me," Emma thought intensely. And then it happened. Emma didn't speak. She didn't open her mouth, but the seal on her throat flared hot, glowing with a faint silver light. A shock wave of invisible force blasted outward from Emma. Back! The voice didn't come from her lips. It came from her mind, amplified by the silver magic in her blood. It was a mental shout so powerful it shattered the glass of the medical cabinets. Serafina was thrown backward, as if she had been hit by a truck. She flew across the room and slammed into the opposite wall, sliding down in a heap. Damon staggered, clutching his head, his eyes widening in shock. The room fell into a stunned silence. Dust from the shattered glass drifted in the air. Serafina groaned, looking up with blood trickling from her nose. She stared at Emma in horror. "What?" Serafina gasped. "What are you?" Emma sat on the exam table, trembling, her hand clutching her glowing throat. She looked at Damon, terrified that he would see her as a monster. But Damon wasn't looking at her with fear. He was looking at her with awe. "She's not a pet," Damon said softly, a dark smile slowly spreading across his face. "She is a weapon." The double doors of the grand throne room were 20 feet tall, carved from solid obsidian and reinforced with silver. Beyond them lay the High Council, the 12 most powerful alpha leaders of the Western Territories. Damon paused before the doors. He adjusted the collar of his military dress uniform, concealing the fresh bandages from where the glass had grazed him. He turned to Emma. She looked breathtaking and terrifying all at once. Mrs. Gable had dressed her in a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her slender frame, with a high collar that didn't quite hide the golden mating mark. But it was her eyes that had changed. Since the outburst in the medical wing, her eyes held a swirling, silvery mist. "They will try to bait you," Damon warned, his voice low and urgent. "Lord Marcus, Serafina's father, leads the council. He is a traditionalist. He believes omegas are livestock. Do not look him in the eye. Let me handle them." Emma nodded, but her hand drifted to her throat. The skin there was tingling, hot and electric. The seal was cracking. She could feel the words bubbling up inside her, heavy and dangerous like molten lead. "Open the doors!" Damon commanded the guards. The heavy stone groaned as it gave way. The throne room was a cavernous hall of black stone. In the center sat a semicircle of 12 high-backed chairs. At the head sat Lord Marcus, a grey-haired alpha with cold, calculating eyes, and a scar running down his cheek. Beside him stood Serafina, nursing a bruised jaw, her eyes burning with hatred. "King Damon!" Marcus boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. He didn't stand. "You have kept the council waiting." "I am the king," Damon replied, his voice calm but laced with menace as he guided Emma toward the raised dais. "The council waits for me, not the other way around." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. "You bring a stray into this hallowed hall," Marcus spat, gesturing to Emma. "And not just any stray. My daughter tells me this creature attacked her with witchcraft." "She defended herself," Damon corrected, stepping onto the dais and turning to face the 12 alphas. Serafina laid hands on her queen. "She is lucky she still has her head." Marcus stood up slowly. "Queen, you speak as if the mating is valid. You have marked an omega with no lineage, no status, and no voice, and worse." Marcus sniffed the air, his nose wrinkling. "She smells of the old magic, the forbidden blood." Emma froze. Marcus knew. "She is a danger to the pack," Marcus declared, raising a hand. The doors behind them slammed shut. Dozens of armed guards stepped out from the shadows, their weapons drawn. Not guns, but crossbows loaded with silver-tipped bolts. "What is the meaning of this?" Damon roared, his golden aura flaring. He stepped in front of Emma, shielding her. "A coup, boy," Marcus sneered. "You are too unstable. The beast controls you. And now you have mated with a witch blood. The council has voted. You are to be stripped of your crown. The girl is to be executed immediately." "Over my dead body," Damon snarled. "That can be arranged." Marcus snapped his fingers. The guards fired. "No!" Emma screamed, inside her head. Damon moved with supernatural speed. He caught 2 bolts in midair, but there were too many. One bolt struck his shoulder, and another buried itself in his thigh. Damon roared in pain, falling to one knee. The silver in the bolts was a neurotoxin. It paralyzed his muscles instantly. "Damon!" Emma rushed to him, her hands hovering over his wounds. "Don't touch him, witch!" Seraphina shrieked, stepping forward with a silver dagger in her hand. "You've poisoned him enough!" Damon groaned, his eyes flashing black as he fought the paralysis. "Emma, run!" But Emma couldn't run. She was surrounded. Lord Marcus stepped down from the dais, a cruel smile on his face. He walked toward Emma, pulling a long, serrated sword from his belt. "I recognize you now," Marcus whispered, tilting his head. "I killed your parents 20 years ago. The border wars." Emma's blood turned to ice. The man in the red cloak. It wasn't a cloak. It was the council robes. "They were the last of the Moon Coven," Marcus gloated, circling her. "I slit your mother's throat. I thought I had found the child, too, but the nursemaid hid you. She sealed you, didn't she? To keep you from using the voice." He raised the sword. "Pity. The line ends here." Damon tried to lunge, but his limbs wouldn't work. He watched in horror as the blade came down. Emma looked at the sword. Then she looked at Damon, bleeding on the floor for her. Something inside her snapped. The fear vanished, replaced by a white-hot rage that felt older than time. The seal on her throat didn't just crack. It shattered. Emma opened her mouth. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She spoke one word, but it came out with the force of a nuclear bomb, layered with the harmonics of 1,000 wolves howling in unison. "Kneel!" The sound was physical. It blasted through the room, shattering the obsidian windows. The chandeliers exploded, raining crystal. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Every alpha in the room, including the guards, slammed into the floor. It wasn't a choice. Their bodies obeyed the command before their brains could process it. The alpha biology was hardwired to submit to the prime voice. Lord Marcus was mid-swing. The command hit him like a physical hammer. His sword clattered away, and he was forced to his knees, so hard the stone cracked beneath his kneecaps. He gasped, choking, unable to lift his head. Seraphina collapsed, whimpering, her forehead pressed to the cold tiles. Silence fell over the ruined room. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the terrified council members. Emma stood alone in the center of the carnage. Her eyes were glowing a brilliant, blinding silver. Her hair floated around her face as if she were underwater. She looked down at Lord Marcus, the man who had murdered her family. "You said I had no voice," Emma said. Her voice was no longer mute. It was melodic, terrifying, and clear as a bell. She walked over to Marcus. He tried to look up, to fight the command, but the pressure of her aura was crushing him. "You killed the Moon Coven," Emma stated, her voice echoing. "You thought you could extinguish the light." She turned to the guards who were trembling on the floor. "Remove the bolts from my mate." The guards scrambled, tripping over themselves in their haste to obey. With trembling hands, they pulled the silver bolts from Damon's flesh. Damon gasped, the paralysis fading as his healing factor kicked in. He stood up slowly, shaking the blood from his uniform. He looked at Emma, his mute little omega, who was now towering over the most powerful men in the kingdom. He didn't look afraid. He looked at her with a burning, worshipful pride. Damon walked to her side. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. The golden mark on her neck pulsed in rhythm with the silver light in her eyes, the union of Alpha and Coven, the strongest pairing in history. "My queen," Damon said, bowing his head slightly to her, a sign of respect no Alpha King had ever shown a mate. Emma looked back at Marcus. "You wanted to execute a traitor," Emma said softly. "So be it." She looked at Damon. "King Damon, what is the penalty for treason against the crown?" Damon smiled, a dark, lethal smile. "Death." Emma nodded. She looked at Marcus. "Sleep." It was a gentle command. Marcus's eyes rolled back in his head. His heart slowed, skipped a beat, and then stopped forever. He slumped forward, lifeless. The rest of the council whimpered, terrified that they would be next. Emma turned to them. "The old ways are dead. The hatred of my kind ends today. If you serve us loyally, you live. If you plot against us, you sleep." One by one, the remaining council members pressed their foreheads to the floor. "Long live the Queen!" one shouted. "Long live the King!" another cried. Damon pulled Emma into his chest, wrapping his arms around her. He kissed her forehead, right between her glowing eyes. "You endured the night," Damon whispered into her hair, referencing the bargain they made in the dark only 24 hours ago. "And you set us both free." Emma smiled, resting her head against his heart. She had found her voice. She had found her mate. And for the first time in her life, she was not afraid of the dark. And that is the incredible story of Emma and King Damon. From a mute floor scrubber to the most powerful queen in history, Emma proved that true power isn't about physical strength. It's about the spirit. But the story doesn't have to end here. Lord Marcus is gone, but the other 11 council members are still watching, and rumors of the Silver Queen are spreading to the rogue lands. Do you think Emma can control her new powers? Or will the magic consume her like it did her ancestors? If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It helps the channel so much. Comment Silver Queen below if you want a season 2, where we see Emma and Damon rule the kingdom and fight the rogues. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a daily dose of drama, romance, and twists. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.